It was never a secret. It was a trap, but they're the ones sinking. And the funniest part is how confidently they walked into it. People who believe they're clever rarely check their own footing. They assume the room bends around their brilliance, that their schemes are invisible because their ego tells them so. Meanwhile, you watch the entire performance with quiet amusement, letting them think their whispers were unheard, their glances unnoticed, their intentions hidden in shadows thinner than paper. The moment they tried to play you, the trap had already sprung, not because you said it, but because their arrogance built it for you. That's the great comedy of betrayal. The betrayer always thinks they're ahead, never realizing the ground beneath them is already cracking. And when the cracks widen, when their confidence turns into confusion, that's when the sinking begins. The psychology behind their downfall is almost poetic. Those who believe they're manipulating others often suffer from something called illusionary superiority. They genuinely think they're smarter, faster, more perceptive. But that belief blinds them. It makes them sloppy. It makes them predictable. While they were plotting, you were observing. While they bragged internally about how easy you'd be to fool, you were learning every flaw in their strategy. They mistook your silence for naivety. They mistook your calm for compliance. They mistook your patience for passivity. And that trio of misjudgments turned into quicksand beneath their feet. The moment their plan depended on your ignorance, their plan died. What truly tightens the noose around them is the fact that you never fought back. You didn't argue. You didn't expose. You didn't warn. That lack of reaction became the psychological hook they impaled themselves on. Manipulators crave resistance because resistance confirms their power. But when the target offers nothing, no fear, no outrage, no visible discomfort, they lose their sense of control. They spiral, second-guess, scramble. That's when their mask slips and their real insecurity shows. They didn't sink because of your trap. They sank because their mind collapsed trying to interpret your silence. You weren't playing the game, you stopped playing entirely. And nothing destroys a schemer faster than an opponent who refuses to dance. There's a relationship dynamic at play here that people rarely recognize. Predators rely on predictable prey. They choose targets who respond exactly as expected. But the moment the prey evolves, becomes calm, observant, emotionally untouchable, the predator's instincts misfire. That's what happened. The moment your energy stopped matching their expectations, their strategy became useless. And here's the irony. They kept walking deeper into the trap, even after the warning signs appeared. Your change should have alerted them. Your detachment should have made them rethink. But ego is louder than fear. Ego told them you were slipping. Reality told them they were drowning. Power politics always reveal themselves eventually. They tried to establish dominance by orchestrating your downfall, believing that control over you would elevate their image. But real power is never demonstrated by force. It's demonstrated by stability. Your stability is what broke them. While they scrambled for control, you held your ground without moving an inch. While they crafted narratives, you let silence dismantle them. And when people see someone remain calm while chaos is being directed at them, it becomes clear who truly holds the power. Their downfall wasn't dramatic. It was gradual, humiliating, internal. They didn't just sink. They sank slowly enough to realize exactly how foolish they had been. What sealed their fate was the emotional trap they never expected: indifference. They aimed to provoke, destabilize, manipulate. But emotional detachment is poison to a manipulator. It leaves them powerless. They need reactions the way fire needs oxygen. Removing that oxygen turned their flame into smoke. The more indifferent you became, the harder they struggled to regain influence. That struggle pushed them deeper into the very hole they dug. Every attempt to regain control made their desperation more obvious. Desperation revealed their intentions. Intentions revealed their weakness. Weakness revealed their fear. And fear is the weight that pulls sinking people further down. Your rise didn't come from revenge, it came from clarity. You stopped needing explanations from people who didn't deserve your questions. You stopped measuring your worth through the opinions of those who thrived on confusion. You stopped participating in dynamics designed to shrink you. And that shift, internal, silent, irreversible, is what turned the tables. You rose by no longer caring whether they understood you. They sank because they couldn't understand how they lost you. That's the real trap freedom. When a person becomes emotionally free, every manipulator around them loses their anchor. Their unraveling is what happens when the facade breaks. Their confidence turns brittle. Their arrogance trembles. Their voice wavers. They overcompensate with louder tactics that only expose them further. They sabotage themselves trying to keep up the illusion. Their own psychology becomes the sinkhole swallowing them. Meanwhile, you grow clearer, steadier, more grounded. Your silence becomes their torment. Your peace becomes their punishment. Your growth becomes evidence that their influence died long before they realized it. Sinking is not a dramatic splash. It's a quiet, inevitable descent into the consequences they created. There's something deeply human about their downfall. People who build traps for others eventually fall into reflections of their own intentions. It's not karma, it's psychology. A deceitful mind overestimates its intelligence, and that overestimation becomes the blind spot that destroys it. They weren't defeated by you. They were defeated by the parts of themselves they refused to confront. Envy, insecurity, entitlement. You didn't push them. You simply stopped being someone they could push. And the moment you stood still, their momentum carried them straight into the pit. All you did was step aside, such a simple act, yet it detonated everything they built with their shaky hands and overwrought egos. Stepping aside wasn't surrender, it was pure psychological strategy. It meant you refused to participate in their narrative, refused to validate their delusions, refused to be the character they needed you to be in their little performance. The moment you shifted your weight out of their path, all the force they were directing toward you had nowhere to go but back into themselves. People who depend on opposition cannot survive without a target. Your absence from their battlefield turned their aggressive momentum into self-inflicted chaos. They swung at shadows. They tripped over assumptions. They fell into traps they once bragged about designing. And all you did was move. That's the funny thing about human nature. Most destruction is self-destruction disguised as ambition. Stepping aside meant you no longer argued, no longer defended, no longer fed into the tension they manufactured for control. Without resistance, manipulators unravel. They rely on friction. It keeps their illusions intact. When you removed friction, their schemes lost shape. Silence became your armor, and stillness became your strategy. They mistook that stillness for weakness at first, but then something unnerving happened. They realized your disengagement wasn't emotional collapse. It was elevation. You rose above the petty chessboard they were so proud of, and from that height, you watched them attempt moves that no longer applied to you. Their panic grew when they realized you weren't reacting. Reaction was their currency. When you stopped spending, their economy crashed. The beauty of stepping aside is that it exposes the architecture of someone's mind. It reveals whether their confidence rests on genuine strength or borrowed bravado. In this case, every hidden flaw they possessed cracked open the moment you stopped holding the structure together. You were the stabilizer of the dynamic without even knowing it. Once you pulled your energy out, their false confidence collapsed like a stage prop missing its support beam. They weren't ready for the psychological vacuum your absence created. And in that vacuum, they confronted themselves for the first time, raw, unfiltered, unmasked. Nothing terrifies a manipulator more than seeing their own reflection without the distraction of your reactions. Stepping aside also reroutes responsibility. They wanted you to break so they could claim victory. But when you didn't break, when you simply detached, the burden shifted. Suddenly they had to justify their intentions. Suddenly they had to explain their behavior. Suddenly they had to confront why the dynamic mattered to them more than it ever mattered to you. That reversal sent their mind spiraling, because a person who acts out of insecurity expects the world to carry the weight of their choices. When the world refuses, they collapse beneath it. All you did was refuse. All you did was step aside, and that tiny movement forced them to hold the consequences of their own actions. There's a deeper psychological mechanic here: projection disruption. When someone wants to control you, they project weaknesses onto you. You're fragile. You depend on me. You'll never walk away. But when you stepped aside, those projections shattered. They no longer had a surface to stick to. Their beliefs about you lost their foundation. And suddenly, they were no longer criticizing you. They were revealing themselves. Their accusations bounced back and exposed their own fears. You didn't argue. You didn't correct. You just stepped out of the frame and let their words ricochet. And what hits a person harder than truth they meant for someone else? Nothing at all. The shift in power was immediate yet invisible. You didn't become stronger in their eyes because you fought back. You became stronger because you removed the battlefield itself. They wanted war, you gave them emptiness. They expected confrontation, you gave them silence. They prepared defenses, you offered no attack. Without an enemy, their identity, built entirely on conflict, began to corrode. They weren't prepared for a world in which you stopped showing up to lose. And that's why stepping aside is so devastating. It's the quietest rebellion, the most elegant revenge, the softest kill. You erased the game by declining to play. When you stepped aside, you also regained time. Time they once drained with their chaos. That time became clarity, and clarity changed everything. You saw the cracks in their character, the insecurities wrapped in arrogance, the desperation behind their cruelty. You saw the truth that had been hidden beneath their noise. Once you understood them, their power evaporated. Understanding destroys illusion. And when illusion dies, the manipulator sinks. They don't know how to operate in truth. You do. That difference is why they're drowning now, while you rise without effort. Stepping aside revealed the necessity of distance. Their presence once felt overwhelming because you allowed proximity. But once you created space, emotional, mental, spiritual, their influence shrank instantly. Distance is a mirror. It shows you who matters and who merely occupied space. And from that distance, you saw how small their impact truly was. They, however, saw how big you had become. That contrast shattered whatever confidence they had left. They realized you were never trapped, you were simply patient. They misread your stillness. They underestimated your restraint. And by the time they understood the difference, it was far too late for them to climb out of the hole they dug. Your decision to step aside didn't just expose their intentions. It exposed your evolution. The old version of you would have reacted. The old version would have tried to fix, negotiate, reason. But this version understands power. This version understands distance. This version knows silence is its own language. They weren't prepared to deal with someone who understands psychological boundaries. They weren't prepared to deal with someone who refuses to internalize their projections. Your evolution became their downfall because it proved something heartbreaking for them. They no longer mattered in your world. Stepping aside also exposed something they never wanted to face. You were never bound to them the way they imagined. They believed your life orbited their approval, their presence, their validation. When you stepped out of their gravitational pull without hesitation, the fantasy collapsed. They expected tears, conflict, pleading, anything that proved they mattered. Instead, they watched you move on with a calm that tore holes through their self-importance. That quiet departure showed them the truth. You were not tied to them. You were tolerating them. And tolerance mistaken for attachment is the cruelest revelation a self-centered mind can receive. Your absence didn't just remove your presence. It removed the illusion that they were irreplaceable. That's why they're sinking. They're drowning in the realization that the person they thought they controlled outgrew them without making a sound. The aftermath of stepping aside created a psychological split inside them. One part angry, one part terrified. One part mesmerized by the version of you they never believed existed. They replay the past differently now. Every moment they dismissed you. Every insult they brushed off. Every power play they thought you never noticed now returns like a spotlight shining on their flaws. They wonder how long you saw through them. They wonder how long you planned your detachment. They wonder how you built the strength to walk away while they were still convinced you needed them. This spiral of questioning doesn't lead to clarity, it leads to collapse. Because a person who once felt dominant cannot stomach the realization that their power died the moment you stopped reacting. They didn't lose control when you stepped aside. They lost control long before that. Stepping aside merely revealed it. What devastates them most is the simplicity of your escape. No dramatic speech, no explosive confrontation, no emotionally charged goodbye. Just a step, a single, precise shift in direction. That simplicity makes their downfall feel even heavier. If you had fought, they could blame you. If you had begged, they could feel superior. If you had argued, they could pretend you cared. But stepping aside removed every excuse they relied on to protect their ego. You walked out of the narrative without struggling, and now they are left wrestling with a ghost of someone they thought they understood. The trap they set didn't spring on you. It opened beneath them the moment you chose peace over performance. And now, as they sink, they finally understand what you've known for a long time. The quietest move is always the deadliest.